Richard Wright's Native Son, 1940, is a groundbreaking novel in American literature and one of the most powerful examinations of systemic racism, poverty, and psychological oppression. The story centers on Bigger Thomas, a 20-year-old African-American man living in 1930s Chicago, who, trapped by the socio-economic conditions of his environment, spirals into a series of tragic events culminating in murder and imprisonment. The novel is divided into three parts: fear, flight, and fate, each capturing a phase in Bigger's life and inner transformation. Through his portrayal of Bigger, Wright confronts the reader with the devastating effects of racial injustice and critiques a society that dehumanizes Black individuals. Native Son was a sensation upon publication, igniting debate for its unflinching depiction of race, violence, and systemic inequality. Today, it is regarded as a literary and political milestone, essential to understanding the roots and consequences of racial oppression in America. Part 1. Fear. The novel opens in the South Side of Chicago in a one-room apartment that Bigger Thomas shares with his mother, brother Buddy, and sister Vera. The family lives in abject poverty. Bigger's existence is marked by limited choices and pent-up rage. Early in the narrative, he kills a rat in the apartment, an act that foreshadows the violence simmering within him. Bigger is intelligent and aware, but emotionally stunted by fear and systemic limitation. He spends time with his friends committing petty crimes and dreams of a better life, but feels helpless. Bigger gets a job as a chauffeur for the wealthy white Dalton family, who pride themselves on their philanthropy toward Black people. Mr. Dalton is superficially kind but patronizing, while Mary, the daughter, is progressive and idealistic, attempting to befriend Bigger in a way that makes him deeply uncomfortable. She and her communist boyfriend, Jan, are alone, treat him with forced familiarity, which only exacerbates his anxiety. One night, Bigger drives Mary home. She is intoxicated, and he helps her into her room. When her blind mother, Mrs. Dalton, enters, Bigger panics. To avoid suspicion, he covers Mary's face with a pillow to silence her. In the process, he accidentally smothers her to death. Terrified of the consequences, Bigger burns her body in the furnace. Part 2. Flight. In this section, Bigger tries to cover his tracks and redirect suspicion. He attempts to frame Jan, whom he sees as a communist threat to the status quo. However, Jan, rather than retaliating, seeks to understand Bigger and ultimately supports his legal defense. Bigger tries to extort the Daltons with a fake ransom note, pretending Mary is kidnapped. But the ashes and bones in the furnace are discovered, and Bigger flees. He hides in abandoned buildings with his girlfriend Bessie, whom he later kills out of fear she will betray him. This second murder is more cold-blooded and highlights the complete moral and psychological breakdown he has undergone. Bigger is soon captured after a citywide manhunt. Part 3. Fate. In the final section, Bigger is imprisoned and faces the death penalty. The media and the public portray him as a brutal monster, reinforcing racist stereotypes. His lawyer, Boris Max, a Jewish communist, offers a spirited defense, arguing that Bigger is not inherently evil but a product of a racist and oppressive society that has denied him dignity, opportunity, and humanity. Max's courtroom speech is a centerpiece of the novel, indicting America for creating the conditions that made Bigger's crimes inevitable. He asks the court, and the readers, to see Bigger not as an isolated criminal but as a symbol of Black America's suffering. Despite Max's efforts, Bigger is convicted and sentenced to death. In his final moments, he achieves a sense of self-awareness, accepting responsibility for his actions and seeing his own humanity for the first time. He begins to understand the forces that shaped his life but also affirms his identity, however flawed and tragic. Character analysis. Bigger Thomas. Bigger is the novel's tragic protagonist. He is not portrayed as heroic or noble, in fact, he is deeply flawed. He commits heinous acts, yet Wright compels the reader to understand rather than absolve him. Bigger is a psychological victim of systemic racism. His violent behavior is not intrinsic but shaped by years of fear, humiliation, and social confinement. He has no role models, no education, and no path to fulfillment. His actions emerge from desperation, not malice. Through Bigger, Wright forces readers to confront uncomfortable truths. How racism distorts human behavior, how fear governs the lives of the oppressed, and how a dehumanized person may respond with violence as a form of asserting control or identity. Mary Dalton. Mary is a symbol of liberal paternalism. Her progressive ideals are naive and dangerous in their failure to understand the power dynamics that define her relationship with Bigger. Her friendliness, though well-meaning, infantilizes him and puts him in an untenable position. Her death, accidental and tragic, becomes a catalyst for Bigger's unraveling and a critique of superficial racial liberalism that does not challenge structural inequality. Boris Max. Max, Bigger's lawyer, is the moral conscience of the novel. As a Jewish communist, he also represents another marginalized identity. His passionate courtroom monologue lays out the novel's philosophical and political thesis. Bigger is a product of society's failures, and unless America confronts its systemic racism, more tragedies will follow. Max's compassion and belief in Bigger's potential humanity contrast with the rest of society's rush to demonize him. Jan Erlone, Mary's communist boyfriend. Jan is an idealist who genuinely wants to be Bigger's friend. Initially, his friendliness feels threatening and patronizing, but Jan's later behavior, his refusal to condemn Bigger and his support for his defense, suggests genuine concern and a willingness to learn. He represents white allies struggling to understand the implications of racial injustice. Mrs. Dalton, Mary's mother, is blind, literally and metaphorically. Her physical blindness is a powerful symbol of the willful ignorance of white society. Though she donates to black schools and employs black workers, she cannot see the everyday suffering and dehumanization black people face. Major themes and analysis. 1. Race and systemic oppression. At its core, Native Son is a devastating critique of institutional racism. Bigger's life is shaped by segregation, poverty, lack of education, and cultural stereotypes. His limited choices produce a psychological state governed by fear and resentment. Wright does not excuse Bigger's crimes but insists they must be understood within a larger context. He shows how the black experience in America is defined not just by poverty but by invisibility, fear, and rage, emotions that explode when denied outlet. Wright challenges readers to confront their own complicity in sustaining systems that produce people like Bigger. 2. Fear and psychological imprisonment. Fear is a defining feature of Bigger's life. Fear of white people, fear of stepping out of line, fear of being punished for imagined crimes. This internalized oppression distorts his behavior and ultimately pushes him toward violence. The title of the first section, Fear, underlines this theme. Bigger lives in a state of perpetual anxiety, where his identity is constructed by how white society perceives him, as dangerous, unintelligent, or invisible. 3. Identity and dehumanization. Bigger's journey is one of fragmented identity. He does not know who he is outside of the role society has forced upon him. He is not allowed to be complex, emotional, or intellectual. His self-perception is shaped by how others view him: dangerous, criminal, inferior. Only in prison does he begin to reflect and recognize his agency. His growing self-awareness is a tragic epiphany, arriving too late to save him but offering a glimmer of humanity. 4. Poverty and urban segregation. Wright vividly portrays the physical and economic conditions of black life in 1930s Chicago: crowded apartments, few job opportunities, segregated neighborhoods. These environments are social traps, breeding crime, frustration, and despair. Bigger is not just poor, he is institutionally excluded from the American dream. His longing for status, control, and recognition, misguided as they may be, stem from this deprivation. 5. Violence and power. Bigger's violence is both literal and symbolic. His acts of murder are attempts to assert power in a world that denies him any. The violence is not glorified but explored as a symptom of deeper illness, the rage that erupts when a person is systematically silenced. His killings, especially of Mary, a white woman, are deeply transgressive, challenging racial hierarchies and triggering society's panic. Wright suggests that violence is a language learned in oppression, a desperate form of self-assertion. 6. Justice and the legal system. The courtroom scenes in the third part of the novel highlight how justice is skewed by race and class. Bigger is tried not simply for murder, but for being black and dangerous. The media demonizes him, and the trial becomes a spectacle reinforcing racial fear. Max's impassioned defense of Bigger critiques the hypocrisy and cruelty of a society that punishes consequences while ignoring causes. Symbolism. The rat. At the beginning of the novel, Bigger kills a large rat in his apartment. This rat symbolizes his own entrapment, living in a squalid, oppressive environment where survival requires aggression and cunning. Blindness. Mrs. Dalton's literal blindness serves as a metaphor for white America's moral blindness, its inability to see or acknowledge the humanity and suffering of black people. The furnace, where Bigger attempts to dispose of Mary's body. It becomes a symbol of destruction, guilt, and the attempt to erase evidence of transgression, akin to society's desire to hide racial injustices. Style and structure. Wright's writing is direct, visceral, and cinematic. The novel's three-part structure reflects a progression, from emotional imprisonment, fear, to rebellion, flight, to consequence and reflection, fate. The narrative voice is third-person limited, closely aligned with Bigger's internal consciousness. This deep interiority allows readers to experience Bigger's thoughts, fears, and justifications, fostering empathy even when his actions are abhorrent. Wright's tone is often didactic and confrontational, reflecting his belief that literature should serve a social and political purpose. Historical and cultural context. Native Son was written during a time of intensified racial segregation, the Great Depression, and the rise of socialist and communist movements in America. Wright, influenced by Marxist ideology, believed that literature should expose societal injustice and give voice to the oppressed. The novel broke barriers by presenting a black protagonist who was neither idealized nor reduced to stereotype. Its unflinching exploration of taboo subjects, race, violence, sexuality, and power, provoked controversy but also established Wright as a major literary figure. Critical reception and legacy. Upon publication, Native Son was a commercial and critical success. It was the first book of the month club selection by a black author, and its influence on American literature is immense. Critics praised its boldness, though some found its portrayal of Bigger too bleak or incendiary. In later decades, the novel has been examined through feminist, Marxist, and psychoanalytic lenses, with critics noting the limited portrayals of female characters and questioning the novel's gender dynamics. Nonetheless, Native Son remains essential reading, offering a stark and timeless critique of how racism cripples individual lives and warps societal values. Conclusion. Richard Wright's Native Son is a powerful exploration of race, identity, fear, and systemic injustice. Through the tragic figure of Bigger Thomas, Wright exposes the psychological toll of oppression and the social structures that deny human dignity to Black Americans. Though deeply unsettling, the novel challenges readers to rethink assumptions about crime, morality, and racial inequality. It forces confrontation with the reality that society creates its monsters, and then punishes them for being what it shaped them to be.